Mercedes sandbagged so hard that they almost needed a forklift. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Formula One, the sports where teams spend 3 months saying that we just focused on ourselves and then immediately drop a 1-2 finish, like they've been hiding a rocket engine in the boot. The Australian Grand Prix was supposed to be chaos, new regulations, and energy deployment buses. And honestly, it was a solid 7 on 10 race. That is exactly what happened when you have unstable regulations that do not work for any driver. Not legendary, but the race is not boring as well. Just the perfect amount of weight. What are Ferrari doing to keep this mode emotionally unstable? Ferrari start actually wasn't a disaster. Now let's address the red elephant in the paddock. Yes, Scuderia Ferrari didn't jump the Mercedes cars early, and yes, the social media declared that the strategy team legally is responsible for the emotional damage. But at that time, it did make sense, guys. Relax. The early virtual safety car basically forced Ferrari into a two-stop race, which is like being told halfway through the dinner that dessert is mandatory whether you're hungry or not. The plan was simple, that you give up about 10 seconds of the track position, come back later with the fresh tires, and pray to the safety car gods for a late interruption. Unfortunately, the safety car gods were busy elsewhere. So Ferrari ended up with a tire advantage, but basically no track position to use it, which in Formula One is roughly as useful as bringing a ladder to a submarine. Mercedes is not winning every race. And yes, please relax. Yes, Mercedes AMG Petronas Formula One team did roll into Melbourne like they accidentally solved the physics masterclass. And yes, George Russell has been dominating throughout qualifying and free practice, and now even in the race, he's the winner. But let's pump the brakes before we crown them the champions of the earth. I'm all for it. I love every time Mercedes is called illegal and they're dominating. But they did had a huge part of advantage that looked like battery deployment strategy, not horsepower and not any magic engines. Because if they were in magic engines, McLaren would have done same that Mercedes is. It's just how efficiently Mercedes has recovered and deployed electrical energy. Think of it as, battery, phone battery in management. Mercedes are just using optimized power saving mode. Meanwhile, everyone is running on TikTok, wondering why the battery dies. So yes, the powertrain itself, it's basically everyone has the same hardware. The difference is how Mercedes have used it cleverly. Ferrari actually surprised me. No, wait. Ferrari, I know they didn't had the raw pace to beat Mercedes, but they weren't miles away either. If they had pitted during the first safety car, we might have seen something spicy. Maybe P2, P3 fight for them. P1 and P2. Especially when we had about lap 27, I thought it was going to be P1 and P2, but let's just ignore that for a second. So yes, we did got the classic Ferrari dynamic in as well, where the engineers are the older sibling who don't get straight A's and goes to university, and the strategy team is the younger sibling in the corner quietly sticking up their carry-ons, up their noses. One guy who clearly did not come here to play was Charles Leclerc. Wheel-to-wheel battles and absolutely zero hesitation. He was absolutely aggressive. He already looks like one of the drivers who's figured out how to properly race these type of cars in the new regulations. Now Ferrari just need two small things: fix the strategy team, fix the car setup. The car is great. Your drivers are there. These are very small tasks, and they're totally manageable if Ferrari has some minds in them left. And then there's Sir Lewis Hamilton. At one point, he was 7 seconds behind Leclerc, and then suddenly he was 0.6 seconds behind him in lap in the last lap. So their second stint race pace, 10 on 10, man. I love this man. This man basically turned tire management into a quiet act of violence, and he could have had his first podium with Ferrari. But obviously, Ferrari, unfortunately, Australia's collective heart shattered before the race even started. Mine too. Oscar Piastri just crashed in the formation run heading to the grid, which means that infamous Australian home race curse continues. And I'm starting to believe that it's real. Since 1985, this race has treated its local drivers like the universe owes them an apology. At this point, Leclerc might have passed his home race curse directly to Oscar Piastri, Percival Leclerc, like a cursed family heirloom. Also, let's not ignore the mechanical drama. New regulations always produce the same predictable results. There are random reliability issues and cars are limping back to the pits. Meanwhile, the engineers do stare at their laptops like they will decode some kind of alien signals. But the number of lapped cars also showed the brutal reality that the half of the grid is still figuring out these cars, the other half has already solved them. And the gap between both of these grid is enormous. After this weekend, there's only one question the paddock should be asking: just how heavy were those sandbags Mercedes were using during pre-season testing? Because if that performance was holding them back, the rest of kid may need therapy. Now, the Australian GP wasn't that bad. It was a solid 7 on 10 for me. There was a very good first lap drama where you had the entire grid shifting up and Mercedes revealing that they have been sandbagging harder than a flood barrier. But I think there was a pretty solid way to start this season.